Discovered my husband hiding his lottery winnings from our family, while secretly financing a luxury lifestyle for his girlfriend. My husband and I have known each other for 6 years and have been married for almost 3 now. We have a 1-year-old, and I'm pregnant with our second child. Our marriage has always felt like a whirlwind, full of emotional highs, filled with love, and we make sure to remind each other of that regularly. He works a 9 to 5, and on top of that, he tutors students. He started tutoring back when we were just kids in college, and it was never a problem. Even as life got busier, he always managed to have time for us. In the years that led up to our marriage, and even during our first year together as husband and wife, it was never really an issue. But something changed in the last year. Suddenly, everything revolved around his tutoring schedule, and it just got worse and worse. He kept piling on more classes to his already full plate. We had a firm line: no classes on Sunday, ever. That was sacred, the one day just for us. But then, last month, he crossed it. He added a Sunday class, brushing it off with, "Exams are coming, I have to." That day, something inside me shifted. I began to feel like my son and I had slipped off his list of priorities. There were nights he'd crawl home at 11, and even on days he tutored online, the door might as well have been locked. He wasn't really there with us. Last Sunday, I couldn't hold it in anymore. I finally told him that he was neglecting his family. He got genuinely offended, insisting he didn't want to work this hard, but he was doing it for us. That's when I broke and told him what I truly believed, that he might actually enjoy it. That maybe it's easier for him to claim he's too busy to spend time with us. That at this point, the extra work isn't for us, it's for something in himself. It hit a nerve. Right now, our finances are solid. We don't need all this extra income, there's no crisis or reason for these additional classes stacking up. Monday through Saturday are already gone, now he wants to take Sunday, too, the day he'd always promised to save for our family. Since our fight, things have been tense and cold between us. He says he can't believe I would accuse him of working for himself and not us. But deep down, I still wonder, am I the one who's wrong here? Update 1. After hearing some comments that I shouldn't have implied he worked just to get away, I realized maybe I was being a bit harsh, so I tried to be more apologetic. When he came back, I knew I had to talk to him about everything boiling inside me. Honestly, the conversation was a train wreck from the start. I brought up how our income far exceeds both our current and projected expenses. I told him I missed him, that our son missed him, and that we needed him to spend more time with us. I made sure to let him know how much I appreciated everything he did for our family. But it was like we were speaking two completely different languages. He explained that the reason he kept taking on more lessons and students was because he wanted us to have the best standard of living possible. Better vacations, better schools for our son, maybe even a second house. I was dumbfounded. I had no idea he felt that way, and I just stared at him, incredulous. I tried to tell him how happy I was with our current life, that we made enough money. If he kept thinking this way, there would never be an end. What if he decided later that we also needed a third house or something else equally extravagant? Right now, what I needed most was him, by my side. At that point, I completely lost control. Tears started rolling down my face before I could even stop them. It wasn't intentional, I didn't want to guilt him or manipulate him by crying, I just felt shattered that we couldn't see eye to eye. Between my sobs, I told him how unhappy I'd been lately, and that I felt like I kept compromising and he kept reneging on our agreements. There was more crying, and he consoled me as best as he could. Eventually, my husband agreed that Sundays should have always been off limits, as we'd promised. He gently asked if I could give him a pass for just one more Sunday, since his students' exams were ending next week, and he promised to keep Sundays completely free from the next semester onward. He also pledged to try to reorganize his classes so he could make it home for dinner, even if it would be a late one. All he asked for was a little time to make things right. Update 2. Over a year ago, I was struggling with my husband's overwhelming work schedule. I'd felt like his tutoring job was taking over our lives, and even though it brought in extra money, it pulled him away from precious family moments. Back then, I questioned if I was in the wrong for wanting more of his time, and the uncertainty gnawed at me for months. Now, things have changed for the better. We're genuinely in a good place, better than I could have hoped when I first confronted these issues. We've been blessed with a daughter, and my husband has made real efforts to balance his workload. He tutors primarily online, something I never thought would make enough of a difference, but it does, it really does. Sundays are sacred in our house once more, with only rare exceptions for which he always asks my approval ahead of time. Wednesdays are free now too. He's managed to switch much of his tutoring to group sessions, which means he's usually done by 8:30 most nights. A big help came when he landed a new day job that's entirely work from home. His stress eased, and the exhaustion that once shadowed our evenings has faded. When our daughter arrived, he was firmly by my side, especially since her arrival lined up with the summer break, freeing him from school obligations. Taking advice I'd long avoided, I hired some help around the house, and it's been a game changer. I've also learned to accept that tutoring is more than just a sideline for him. It genuinely makes him happy in a way his software development never has. He beams with pride when his students succeed, their triumphs drawing in even more eager learners. He still insists he's only doing it for the finances, but I know the truth, our needs don't require the extra income. Tutoring feeds something deeper in him. Of course, it hasn't all been smooth sailing. I had to stand my ground, especially in the early days after our big conversation. There were moments I made it absolutely clear that I needed him to show up for us, not just financially but emotionally and physically. I even confided in his older sister, something he wasn't thrilled about at the time. She confronted him bluntly, warning that his pace would either send him to an early grave or drive us apart. As harsh as it was, it struck a nerve and pushed us both towards compromise. We don't argue much, but when we do, it's almost always about his availability. Those arguments have grown rare, though, and we've struck a balance that works for us. Still, there are remnants of old frustrations that linger. Our evening tea, a simple ritual where we decompress together, is now reserved for Wednesdays and Sundays, and I treasure those quiet moments more than ever. Occasionally, he misses dinner, but it's rare and he tries to avoid it. Our friends and family have adjusted to our rhythm, scheduling important events around us. Yet, there are times he can't make it, a gender reveal, a spontaneous dinner, and I feel those absences, even as I understand them. If I'm fully honest, I carried this idyllic image of our home after 5 p.m., him always there, our family sharing laughter and togetherness. Reality, as it tends to, chipped away at that dream. I worry sometimes about the bonds we're forging and whether we'll miss out on experiences that create lasting memories. The housework doesn't overwhelm me anymore. We hired help, and my mother lives nearby. That support network has been a lifeline. We've been married for over 4 years now. Our son is 3, and our daughter is 16 months old. My husband, with his day job and growing tutoring business, fills his schedule to the brim, sometimes even on Sundays if I'm okay with it. We've tried, especially in the last year, to protect our family time. Recently, though, everything bubbled over again. We had planned for months to go to Spain at the end of December, a perfect escape booked well in advance. Then, last weekend, he asked to postpone the trip by 6 months, right at the last minute. My frustration boiled over. I told him no, that it was unfair of him to do this now. He pleaded with me, explaining work had exploded unexpectedly and that the downtime mattered to him just as much, but I couldn't bear the disappointment. I told him I would go anyway, even if he backed out, maybe even invite my best friend if he couldn't make it. Yesterday, I asked him point blank what his plan was. As he showed me frantic client messages, I cut him off. I didn't want business explanations. He'd already made a promise. I wanted to know if I was the bad guy here, for insisting we stick to our plans, and for even entertaining the idea of traveling without him if it came to that. Our finances are secure. Missing 2 weeks for his business would make no real difference. I even considered compromising and suggested maybe he could tutor online from Spain. It's not ideal, but at least we'd be there together. It's a solution I'm still pondering. I've always tried to keep the specifics of his work vague because people tend to sympathize when they hear that he's helping students. But at the end of the day, this is his business, not a charity, and sometimes I wish people understood that distinction. The improvements in our lives prove that balance can be found, but it takes hard conversations, tough choices, and holding each other accountable too. What matters most? Whenever people hear that my husband runs his own tutoring business, there's this instant admiration that clouds their judgment. It's wild how much people respect him for it, to the point that even my own mom can't help but join in. If I ever mention, just in passing, how busy he always is, the responses are always the same. Yeah, that must be tough, but think of all the students' futures he's shaping. They act like he's changing the world. Meanwhile, all I can think is, what about our own kids? Is it terrible that I feel this way? It's just, the truth is, my own kids get less of his undivided attention than the children of strangers do. I can't help but see the irony. If we got divorced right now and somehow shared 50-50 custody, I honestly think our kids would get to see him more. That thought hits me hard. Sometimes I want to shake him and just ask, is this really the way you want to live? Is this what you want for our family? Because I know I don't. If he's content to keep things as they are, fine. Maybe for some people this would be enough. But I'm not happy, and the fact is, this keeps coming up. Again. And again. I try to talk to him, to tell him what's going on, but he just doesn't listen. Then later he'll complain about how things are falling apart, how he's exhausted, how he's having problems, never quite seeing how the problems are the ones he's creating himself. I just wish he would see it from my side, even for a second. Update 3. I had decided to suggest that my husband do his tutoring classes online while we were in Spain as a compromise, and that was my plan moving forward. But then, on Thursday, he caught a cold and had been really down and out for the last couple of days. He even had to take 2 days off from his day job because he felt so awful. No matter how much I urged him to rest, he still tried to power through and do his tutoring classes scheduled, but he just couldn't get through it and ended up canceling those too. I realized it wasn't the right time to have an important conversation while he was this sick, so I decided to postpone it. Secretly, it was almost nice to see him do absolutely nothing for those 2 days. Not that I'd wish him sick, but it forced him to slow down. He actually spent time with me and the kids, and even a couple of his friends and our mutual friends came over to see him, since they rarely get to spend time with him outside of important occasions. Last night, after things settled, I brought up the vacation again. To my surprise, he agreed without much resistance. He said he'd either move some classes around or take them in advance, but either way, he'd be with us on the vacation. I thanked him and reminded him that he really needs to start taking it easy, his health is clearly being affected. Of course, he brushed it off, saying his illness was just because of the change in weather, not the stress of work. Still, I brought up our previous agreement, that he'd struck a good balance for a while, but things have started slipping back to how they were before. He pointed out that he always asks me before filling up Sundays, and that's true, but there are only so many times I feel like I can refuse. He also mentioned that 2 people he knows have recently been laid off, and that times are tough economically. Honestly, I told him I don't understand why that has to affect us. We're doing well financially, we have plenty of savings, our careers are good, and his business keeps growing every year. We're secure. He said he was too sick to talk about it, and insisted that right now our kids are young and don't need him as much, and that his classes are important because students and parents count on him to help get them into good universities. I had to tell him that our son is now old enough to want to spend more time with him. I can handle compromising on my own needs and wants, but I won't do that with our kids. He heard what I was saying and promised he'd make the necessary changes. I'm genuinely relieved our family vacation is back on track. I've really been looking forward to us having this time together. Update 4. It wasn't graceful. Our son decided takeoff was betrayal and screamed through half the flight. Our daughter slept on me like a hot water bottle, and my husband's eyes did that flicking thing between the seatback map and his phone while he pretended to watch a movie. I watched him more than I watched the clouds. He had sworn up and down he'd move things around and that these 2 weeks were ours. But his phone kept lighting up. It sat on the tray like a third child. On our second morning, we took the kids down to the beach early, hoping to outrun the crowds and our own habits. The air was cool enough to make goosebumps, the water that kind of metallic blue that looks fake. Our son ran for the surf and turned right back around when the water kissed his toes like it was an animal. He looked up at my husband and said, "In this long, serious way, Baba, no teaching today, okay?" Then the phone vibrated again. I saw it before he reached for it. I don't think I've ever moved faster for any inanimate object in my life. I snatched it and shoved it into his back pocket and said, "You promised." He nodded, turned to pull our son into the water, and of course a little wave made this dramatic leap and hit his shorts and that phone like it had been waiting its whole life to be the third parent between us. By afternoon, it was dead. His face went blank the way people go quiet in church. He tried all the tricks I know he's lectured other people about: rice, hair dryer, prayers. The shops were closed for siesta, and then when they opened, the repair guy told him to come back tomorrow and maybe. That maybe felt like the ocean finally coming for his edges. He went still. He reached for my hand on the walk back with the kids slumped over in the stroller and didn't let go until we were at the hotel. It was like the world took a breath around him. Without the constant humming thing in his pocket, he realized he didn't need to check anything, and then he realized he didn't know what to do with the quiet. We lay on the bed while the kids napped and looked out the balcony at laundry lines clacking in the wind. He said, "This is the first time in months I can hear the breeze," and I laughed because he sounded like a bad poem. He laughed too, and it was this rusty sound. He fell asleep with his hand still on mine. The next day the phone came back to life with a new screen and a lecture from the repair guy about tourists and water. Before he turned it on, he handed it to me and said, "Give me an hour first." He sat on the floor with our daughter and lined up her stuffed animals and did roll call, all the names in that teacher voice that usually isn't for us. It stunned me how much I miss that voice when it's used on our children. We had real moments. Our son held my husband's face with both sticky hands to make him look at a sandcastle he'd built that was really just a damp hill and a moat. My husband actually looked. He played. He jumped into the cold water up to his neck and came up sputtering and laughing so hard he sounded like a different man. We got sunburned on the same strip of forehead because we both forgot to do that spot. We stood in front of the Sagrada Familia, and our son whispered like it was a secret, "Daddy, you build this?" He paused, smiled in that crooked way, and said, "No. But I can look at it with you." On the balcony one night, with both kids finally asleep and the clatter of cutlery from the restaurant downstairs, he told me the story I've only heard hinted at. When he was 10, his dad's shop went under and they were almost evicted, and his father sat him down and said, "It won't happen to you if you never stop." He said he's been chasing never stop ever since. "The money is the jar I put the fear into," he said. "The students make it easier to call the fear noble." He said it quietly, like he didn't want to wake anything by saying it out loud. I told him I don't need him to be noble. I need him to be brave enough to be ordinary with us. I told him I'm not asking him to stop loving what he does. I am begging him to love us loudly too, to pick us first enough that it feels obvious even to a 3-year-old. He opened his phone then and drafted an email to his students and their parents. I watched him write the sentence 3 times. "I will be unavailable from December 20th to January 3rd, he typed, deleted, typed again. He looked at me, back at the screen, and then he added, "And going forward, no Sunday sessions." He pressed send like you press a bruise. Then, because the universe likes tests, his biggest client, wealthy, anxious, the one who always has a way of making people think his emergencies are everyone's, called. Twice. Then sent 4 paragraphs about an upcoming entrance exam. My husband stared at the name glowing on the screen. He let it go to voicemail. Then he typed a reply that said, I'm on a family vacation. We can pick this up when I return. Sundays will be unavailable moving forward. He didn't look at me for approval. He just put the phone face down. It didn't turn him into a new person on the spot. On our last night, he checked his email after dinner and got sucked into a spiral for 15 minutes, which turned into half an hour, and I could feel my chest do that clampy thing. I said, please. He apologized without defensiveness and closed it, and we walked for gelato. That sounds small, but for us, small felt like a miracle. Here is the part I didn't expect. My best friend ended up joining us for 3 days. She found a cheap flight and texted me from the airport with a picture of her coffee and, don't be mad. I wasn't. She is the one who told me months ago to go even if he didn't. Watching the three of us, me and her and the kids, move through a city together, easy and light, made something in him click. He said, later, quietly in bed, I forgot how much I like you when I'm not counting minutes. It stung and healed at the same time. When we got home, there was a predictable pileup. He had a wait list that looked like a CVS receipt, and 2 parents were offended he hadn't responded sooner. I braced for the backslide. Instead, he did something new. He raised his rate slightly, combined 2 individual students into one small group, and told 3 families that he didn't have availability this term but could recommend someone he trusts. He hired a grad student he's mentored for years to handle scheduling and messages so he doesn't have to be the one to tell everyone no in real time. And he put our tea back at the center, eyes on me at the table, not on a screen. Wednesday and Sunday evenings became what we said they would be instead of what we hoped they'd be. There are still moments. He got an offer to consult for a new prep center that would have eaten Saturday's entire. Old him would have said yes and tried to figure out the rest later. He forwarded me the email and wrote, I'm going to say no unless you see an angle I don't. I wrote back, say no. He did. He walked around the house afterwards with this wild, loose energy, like someone had taken a weight off his chest and he had to relearn his posture. Our son has started dragging a chair to the counter so he can help pour milk at breakfast. He'll look up at my husband with that serious little face and ask, are you going to work now? And more often than not, my husband says, not yet. I'm with you. It's not every day, but it's enough days that the sentence has started to feel familiar in our kitchen. I keep waiting for the other shoe, because I don't trust anything that looks too tidy. But I'm also letting myself exhale in pieces. The fear in him has a shape now, and when it shows up, we can name it instead of letting it steer. He still loves his students. He lights up when they get into schools they want. He still believes he's doing it for us. The difference is that he's beginning to believe me when I say that for us looks like sitting in a sandbox, letting the phone ring, and eating dinner 10 minutes later because someone needed one more push on the swing. Update 5. January tried to turn our bones into glass. The cold made the kids' breath into little ghosts in the corridor when we left for nursery, and my husband started wearing that old college hoodie with the sleeves chewed from thinking, as if the fabric remembered a softer person. One morning, after drop-off, he stood in the kitchen with his phone in his hand like it was a small, living thing he was about to release into the wild. He asked our son to get the step stool and bring over the bread tin. He put the phone inside, shut the lid, and turned to our son very solemnly. Guard it, he said, like they were in a story. Our son puffed up and sat cross-legged on the floor like a little security guard, city of crumbs on his knees. It lasted exactly 12 minutes before a vibration skittered the tin like a beetle and both of them flinched. He laughed, then he held my face and said, I don't want to be ridiculous. I just need to break the reflex. It was ridiculous. It was also the first time I've watched him try to build a ritual instead of an excuse. 2 weeks later, the preschool sent an email about a winter sing. The kind that happens at 11:15 on a Friday when working parents are meant to teleport out of their lives and land on tiny plastic chairs. He phoned me from the car to say he'd blocked the hour, his voice tight in that way it gets when he's pushed time around like furniture to make space. He walked in late by 3 minutes, and I spotted his shadow before I saw him. The doorway framed him and the light glanced off the screen in his hand. Our son was in the front row wearing a cotton ball cloud pinned to his shirt, lips moving a beat behind everyone else. He looked up mid-verse and saw his father. His whole face did that opening thing, like a light has a lid and the lid got taken off. My husband put the phone face down on the teacher's desk without being asked. I watched his eyes rest on our child like it was the only thing in the room with gravity. Then some other father's device went off with a chime, a spilled soda of sound, and my husband's hand twitched toward nothing, the ghost of a habit searching for a body. He stilled it, he clapped on the offbeats, and he didn't care that he was wrong. After, in the hallway, his mother's number flashed across the screen. He looked at it, looked at me. Answer, I mouthed. He did, and his jaw went tight while his voice went gentle, which is how he has always used himself as buffer for everyone. Her neighbor had fallen, she was spooked, she needed him to explain the insurance letter that arrived like a dare. He told her he'd come by that evening. He ended the call and I saw his childhood fold itself back into his posture. In the car he said, I'm going to turn into him if I don't pay attention. The hymn of his father again, sung in a different key. He went to his mother's that night and came back with the smell of their hallway in his clothes, onion and damp carpet and that powdery note of old wood. He lay on the couch with his feet in my lap and told me how his mother had said, without looking at him, we were proud you never stopped, but sometimes I wished you would. He said it like someone had nudged a picture frame straight in his head. My best friend booked 2 nights in a seaside town for my birthday and sent me the reservation with a row of emojis that would embarrass a teenager. I told him I wanted to go. He kissed me like he'd been waiting to be asked to carry something for me and said, "Go." I went. The sea in February looks like it's been thinking dark thoughts, but the hotel had a bathtub so deep it felt like a small pond. I slept. I ate something with too much garlic and didn't talk to anyone whose last name I share. He sent pictures without commentary, our daughter with sock hair, our son arranging blueberries into a constellation. At 6 p.m. on Saturday I stopped myself from texting, "How's bedtime?" And he beat me to it. I'm sorry for every time I said I was too tired to do this part. The next morning he sent a video of the 3 of them banging wooden spoons on pots like a very supportive riot. Later he told me he took a call from Mr. Emergencies while our son was on the toilet shouting for more toilet paper, and at the absurdity of that ballet, stretching the phone between cheek and shoulder, trying not to drop a roll onto a small pair of knees he is responsible for, did something to him that all my quiet begging couldn't. He said to Mr. Emergencies, mid-call, "I'll call you on Monday. I'm with my kids." Then he hung up and thought his skull might crack open from the quiet that followed, and then it didn't, and then breakfast burned but they ate it anyway. He asked for a therapist number like it might be a trap that could save him. His sister had one, of course she did, and we found ourselves in a waiting room that smelled like peppermint gum and hand cream, not because I was invited inside, but because I wanted to see him walk into a place he'd resented his whole life. He came out 47 minutes later with a piece of paper in his hand and his eyebrows lifted like someone had told him a secret he almost already knew. On the drive home he asked me whose voice says never stop when I'm alone, and I said my father's. Then he asked me whose face I see when I think about stopping, and I said yours. He laughed without humor. He told me I could borrow his voice for a while if I needed to. He rolled the paper up and tapped it against his knee. It was a log of hours to protect. A practice. Not magic. But something. Things kept happening because life doesn't care about breakthroughs. One of his star students bombed a mock exam and spiraled, and the parent wrote a letter so tight with panic it read like a threat. He read it at the sink with a sponge in his hand, the suds sliding down his wrist like satellite weather. I waited for the old tilt, that leaning forward that means he's already half gone. Instead he rinsed his hands, dried them, sat at the table, and took out the paper from the therapist. He read the sentences like instructions to a trick he wanted to get right. He called the parent and said, "We're going to make a plan." "Not tonight." The parent said, "But the exam," and he said, with a steadiness that made me look up from cutting our daughter's grapes, "Not tonight." He hung up, and then he looked at me like he needed to check that I was still there, that he could choose this and the house wouldn't fall down. I was there. On a Sunday afternoon that pretended to be spring, he took our son to the pool for the first time in months. The ceiling was loud with echoes and chlorine, and our son clutched his neck like a koala, insisting he would die immediately if it didn't go exactly the way he decided in his head. My husband was patient in a way he rarely affords adults. "I won't let go until you say," he said, and my chest did an ache I did not disguise. He didn't look at the clock once. When our son finally unfurled his fingers and let his ears go under, eyes wide and terrified and proud, my husband whooped so loudly the lifeguard smiled. He carried that damp, cold pride home like a steaming loaf of bread. And because the universe likes punchlines, 2 days later he got an email with a subject line like a brass band, "Partnership opportunity." A prep center with glossy brochures and glass walls wanted him to run a program. The money was the kind that comes with a new watch and a lot of promises. It would have eaten Saturday's whole and asked for the bones, too. He brought the laptop over to me on the couch and read the email out loud in that neutral voice he practices when he's trying not to tip the scales. I heard the old itch between the lines. "We could," he said, and then he stopped. "Do you want it?" I asked, knowing he's bad at that question. He picked at the seam of the cushion the way my daughter picks at stickers. "I want it," he said. "I want to not have to decide." He closed the laptop. I promised myself a shape to the week. If I say yes, I'm saying yes to the version of me I said goodbye to in Spain. He typed a reply. He wrote, "Thank you for thinking of me. I'm not taking on Saturday commitments." He hit send and then stood abruptly like he had to walk the decision out of his body. He paced the length of our small living room 3 times and then lay on the floor and let our son drive a car across his back like a road. He whispered into the carpet, "I didn't die." We went to his parents for dinner the next night. His father told the story of the shop closing again, like he always does when he's tired, but this time he added a piece I hadn't heard. "I stopped stopping for your mother," he said into his plate. I thought it would count. It didn't, it just made me disappear into a different corner. The room went a little underwater. My husband said, very gently, like he didn't want to startle a bird, "I'm learning to stop while people are watching." His father looked at him for a long time and then nodded once, like he was giving away a tool he loved. He still has moments where he disappears into a screen, and I still have that tightness that makes my ears hot. Last week, during our tea, his scheduling assistant, this sweet overachiever with perfect punctuation, sent a message about a family pushing for Sunday. I saw the name march across the top of his phone. He didn't touch it. He took a breath and asked me about a book I was reading that I'd told him about twice already. Our daughter, merciless in her love, dumped her entire cup of water onto his lap like a blessing, and he howled and stood up, dripping, and we laughed so hard we hiccuped. There's a clear plastic jar on our counter now with a crooked label our son wrote, "Family First." Every time my husband says no to a thing that would take him away in a way that matters, our son gets to drop a coin in. It's a silly thing, and the coins aren't real, and still the sound it makes, little metal clinks like applause, has weight. 2 weeks ago, he was making eggs when he stopped mid-stir and said, "I don't have to outrun something that's not chasing us." He said it like he was testing the sentence to see if it held. I'm not naive. March is coming, and with it, exams that make households hum like beehives. But he's building small fences around the hours that are ours, and instead of me standing there with my hands out like a useless scarecrow, he's hammering the posts in himself. Our son asked him yesterday, on the way to the park, "Are you going to work now?" And my husband said, "Yes." This. He pointed at the scooter, the stick, the sun. "This is work." Our son considered that and said, "You're good at it." My husband put his hand over his heart like someone had handed him a certificate you can't frame. He didn't reach for his phone to tell anyone. He just kept walking.